Hey folks, Jesse here. Thank you for tuning in to our Trew Audio Soundmixer Podcast Interview Edition, where we get to sit down and chat with location sound professionals. We get to hear about how they started in their career, the philosophy of their work. We'll talk shop, gear, and so much more. Today we had the privilege of talking to our great friend and fellow colleague, Whit Norris. And here's what he had to say. Whit, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks, Jesse.
So, here at Trew Audio, more than just renting and selling audio gear, we want to be a resource to, aspiring, sound mixers and even seasoned professionals. So with our Sound Mixer podcast, we want to, bring folks like you and, ask you a few questions that I think are going to be helpful to the whole location sound community. So we compiled a few questions that we're going to ask you.
All right.
And, before we kind of dig into that, what's your story? Tell us a little bit, where you're from and...
Originally from Birmingham, Alabama. Grew up there, went to school there, and got my start there. In college, I guess I could back up a little farther. In growing up, I had a great appreciation for music, and tried to be a musician a little bit during the teenage years, but had a lot of fun. Also, learned how to solder when I was a teenager. Learned how to put together the different radio kits and things like that. And in college, I wanted to go work in radio. I had a real love for radio and started working at the college radio station. And that was back in the days, Jesse, where we cut and spliced tape. So I actually learned how to cut and splice quarter-inch tape and cart things up, and learned a lot about recording and playing music and being on the air. And then even though I was a film communication major, I didn't gravitate towards film or film sound. I had my focus set on radio. And a few years into college, a production company asked me if I wanted to do an internship with them, and they brought me down and showed me their studios and setup, and I fell in love with it. It's like, oh, this is great. And shortly thereafter, I was given a job there. That was because I put the film and tape library together, and nobody knew where anything else was, so they had to give me a job. And anyway, I went on. I was taught how to use an Nagra, and we even did some bad car commercials on 3/4 inch that I learned to operate in the field, and doing sound on that with Sony ECM 50s and other things. Come on down. Buy it right now. The guys screaming and hollering, but that was some of my early days, as well as some industrials and other types of commercials and documentaries.
So you'd say that's kind of when the passion,
Yeah.
for sound kind of...
Yeah. When I started that production company, they couldn't get me out. I was there every time I was not in school, every moment. And they actually had dressing rooms and showers there, so really I didn't have to leave.
So one of the questions, the people who become production sound mixers get into the professions in a number of ways.
Right.
Obviously, for instance, some simply want to be involved in production, and for them, sound was an opportunity to get it. Some might be attracted to the electronic engineering part of sound for picture,
Mm-hmm.
and others might have experience with, like you said, with music, early on. In your case, what attracted you to film and video production sound?
Well, the fact I'd had the campus radio and a little bit of commercial radio background and doing that, and then when I was introduced to more of the film side and how creative that was, and then doing sound for that was a lot different than doing sound in a recording studio or in a on-air booth for a radio show or something like that. So the idea of being on location, being with a camera crew and recording dialogue, it was great. It was making movies. It was fun. We also did Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. We did their circus spots for around the country and the Walt Disney Ice shows. There was not a lot of sync dialogue involved with that, but some. And so that was some of my early recordings.
And that was in your hometown?
We traveled.
Okay.
The post was done there, but we traveled for a lot of the shooting. Ringling Brothers is kind of based out of Florida, so a lot of it was shot down there.
Because you're based in Atlanta now.
Yes, I've been in Atlanta since 1987 via New York.
Via New York?
Via New York. Interesting story. Ringling Brothers got a group of us to come to New York, and they had 150 boxes of film, negative, mag, and they had no idea what they had. So I learned how to operate a sound reader, and I learned how to sync sound with 16 and 35 millimeter film. Basically, we repaired everything and transferred it for their archival purposes. And because of that, I became a circus historian, just because of all the footage that we would go through.
Huh. So what brought you to Atlanta?
A group of guys that I was working with that had worked at the production company in Birmingham decided the project ended in New York, and some of the other guys had moved away. The production company just became a post house in Birmingham, and most of us were production-oriented people. So a group of us decided to relocate in Atlanta, had a small production company, did some commercials and shoots for a while, but I was still doing sound the whole time. And then everyone went on their way. One of my partners went on to help launch the Cartoon Network as a producer. Another one went on to be a cinematographer, and I myself went on to be a sound mixer full time.
So you were in Atlanta because right now it's booming.
Right.
You know, that's always the talk now. So you were there when there wasn't probably a ton as it is now.
Oh no, not at all. I mean, used to until really just 4 or 5 years ago. I was gone most of the time. I was working in Pittsburgh, Texas, Los Angeles, New Mexico, but I traveled a lot until just a few years ago before it really took off here.
So with that in mind, there are probably a lot of things that are important in production sound career, and newcomers, obviously at first don't understand. For those starting out, what are some of the things that they should be aware of if they won't find obviously in operators manuals, like for example social skills with the crew on a set?
Yeah, that's the one thing that's hard to teach. It's easy to teach sound, I think, just teaching somebody how to operate a mixer or even how to operate a wireless mic. But teaching how a sound department works with 100 other people on the set is really something you don't read in a book. It's something that I think only real experience will get you there, and that is spending time on a set, whether it be a PA or any opportunity you get to work on the set. But I think that's something that's really hard to teach, that you don't really just pull out of a book.
And in that same mindset, obviously a lot of people aspiring, mixers always want to know, so how do we get in? How do we get in and do these big gigs? Or how, and I think a big part of, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of it is relationships. And just friendships that develop, and out of that, you're on set, and even just networking. And here at Trew Audio, we try to put together events where we just get the community, that sound community together, just to chat and hang out. And I think that's important. Wouldn't you say that's kind of a big?
Absolutely. I'm a big proponent of relationships and trying to teach the young people, come out, meet people. Get to know people, the Facebook groups, go have lunch or coffee with someone, and, encourage them. I mean, because being that there's only, depending on what the project is, 1, 2, or 3 people in the sound department, you've got to convince somebody to give you a chance to be on their team. And so therefore it's about that relationship. And it's also about the relationships when you're starting off early, maybe working on more indie productions, and then usually these people are moving up. And then hopefully you'll move up with them. Yeah, but it's starting off, even whether it's a small film or what. I mean, I started off on some very low budget movies. Some of the first movies I did, would have been Future Zone, and they're really B movies by a gentleman, David Pryor, who just recently passed away. He did about 40 movies, but he was kind of the Roger Corman of the Southeast. And he gave a lot of us our start. And he actually gave me a lot of confidence. Saying that I was some of the best tracks he'd ever had, which always kind of made me nervous. Well, who has been recording your tracks before? And that's back in the days of, you maybe had 2 wireless in the kit and a couple of boom mics and a Nagra and a Sela mixer. So it was pretty basic back then compared to what we have. There were no Comtex back then or IFBs. You could put everything in one case just about and do a whole movie with it. Last couple of weeks, I have acquired a new Kantar from Trew Audio, and I'm learning that, and I'm prepping for my next show. And I actually Glenn's been kind enough to encourage mixers to come to his shops to prep and to prepare for their jobs. And so I've been up here learning the Kantar and wiring it into my cart. And there's been a gentleman up here who's been pretty much hanging up here every day that I'm up here working on it. And John, who I've got to know very well, a young and upcoming sound person, realized that he's very smart, very intelligent, and I've had the opportunity to recommend him to some other people here in the last couple of weeks, and he's actually gotten a couple of jobs because of that. But that shows the relationship, and it shows, I think, what I know, the article with Aggie and Mark Alano that has appeared in some of our sound trades, talking about mentorships, and I think that's really important, finding a young and upcoming person and investing your time in them and teaching the craft, because the craft isn't just taught in school or in some book you download for the internet, but there's some very great tools and great things for that, but it's about passing it on from person to person.
Yeah, speaking about mentors, who would you, do you have a mentor that, early on that, I'm sure throughout the years you come across so many people that influence, inspire you, encourage you.
Early on at the production company I started out with, which was Air Mobile Productions, there was a gentleman there, John Hathaway, who was the first guy to show me how to over and under cable. And he told me, if you're going to stay in this business, you'll be doing this the rest of your life. You need to learn how to do it. And I would go out in the equipment warehouse and practice rolling cable. He was a gentleman that wore several hats. He knew audio and knew it well, but he was really more of a lighting person. But he passed that on to me. And then over the years, just before the internet was what it was, we actually would get on the phone and talk with each other. I would talk with other mixers, that I'd befriended or whatever from around the country, and we'd talk about different techniques and things we did and experiences we had on our, different productions and compare notes.
Early on, can you, obviously this is not something we're not always proud to talk about, and making mistakes on set early on, but sometimes you just kind of have to. You have to kind of go through that in order to really learn, like, wow, that will never happen again because I learned this. Is there a moment for you that from production and...
Yeah, we're going to have to come back to that. I'm going to have to think about that, of what the one thing I really learned was... Well, you know what, I'll tell one story. I think this has happened to everybody once, and this was, I think, in the early DAT days. I realized I had not rolled on a take, and so I was never going to let that happen again. I did get the take from the video sys guy, and so re-recorded it, so they did have it, and still had to sync it. But I mean, that was one mistake that I made. Most people that I've talked with have made that mistake. And if you haven't, then you haven't been doing it long enough.
Oh man, that feeling.
Yeah.
Oh crap.
Yeah.
Like, how do I tell everybody that I wasn't rolling?
Yeah, and well, I didn't. I just managed to cover it up.
Yeah, that's the.
There has been a time when obviously there was a technical problem or something with the recorder or on my end, and it's happened to everyone over the years, where you have to just go to the director. I did not get that. I had a problem, whatever that problem may be, and that's always tough. But also, I think the best thing is owning up. If you do make a mistake, take the blame for it. It's your fault. Don't throw somebody else under the bus. And if you step up and take the blame, people are going to respect you for it.
It's common for different crews to work slightly different in different ways. How do you like to structure the responsibilities, like, for yourself, your boom operator, utility person? Do you like to be close to set, during a production, or you kind of rather be a little bit away from that?
I like to be a little bit away. A lot of reasons: to give the shooting crew, the lighting crew, give them room to work. They have to move a lot of equipment around, and a lot of times that includes lifts and cranes and things like that take a lot of room. So I'll be back in the corner or be back around behind the set. And I also like having a nice environment, a little quiet, where there's not a lot going on when we're recording. So it allows me to focus. Then also our follow cart will be there, and so it's more of a quieter place to be able to wire an actor. Doug Cameron and I have been together. He's my boom operator. Doug and I have been together. I've lost track of time. I can probably say over 14 years, maybe more. As the years go by, I'm losing track. But Doug is I consider one of the top 10 boom operators in the U.S. Most people that know him would agree with that. The problem with Doug, he makes it look so easy. And he manages the set. He has a great personality. He's very smart, knows his craft very well, and knows how to work with all the other departments to get what we need. He and I don't even have to communicate that much because we've worked together for so long. We know how we're going to approach something unless it's something really out of the ordinary. And also, Doug is one of these boom operators. He never leaves the set all day long. I mean, sometimes we need to get him to sit down for a few minutes to get off his feet and legs, because he is there on the set all day long. Wow. He's not hanging out at the sound cart with me. He's not hanging out at the follow cart. He's on the set, and that's where he lives, and that's where he feels the most comfortable. So that's part of my workflow. So I've always got Doug there, and the directors pretty much understand, and I let them know, if you talk to Doug, you're talking to me. You don't have to find me or anything else. If you say it to Doug, you've said it to me. And that most of them are comfortable with that.
So I think the important thing about that is, with working with your team, you build that trust, with like you mentioned, when the director doesn't have to come find you, speaking, to Doug is like speaking to you. And that's something you kind of develop, a lot of people probably curious about that. It just, you show up on set and it's automatic, but it's kind of something, you build, with being a team for a few years, you kind of learn each other and you learn to grow. And I think that's the importance, of that, kind of having a strong core, wouldn't you say?
And that's the whole thing, is making sure Doug has what he needs. Sometimes it might even be bringing him a bottle of water, or if they bring out some food. Sometimes it doesn't make it all the way into where the camera is to making sure he's taken care of. And we really try to watch out for Doug, since he's always there and it rarely leaves the set. And on my team for over the past year is Alana Knudston. She is a young lady. It's the first time I've had a young lady as a part of the team for a long time. I've worked with other ladies throughout the years, but she's somebody that has joined our team, and she has the personality to be able to deal with the actors and wiring them up. They all enjoy working with her, and the female actors don't mind a female utility wiring. I've noticed that makes them a little more at ease. And also, Alana's a bit younger than Doug and I, and so she's really good with the younger people on the crew and is a great ambassador for us.
So describe a little bit, you guys arrive on set, with your team,
mm-hmm.
Do you kind of sit with them and you guys kind of rally up, or it's just you show up and everybody kind of already knows what they need to do?
Yeah, generally it's going to be unloading the equipment, getting the equipment in the set, finding out when the rehearsal's going to be, to see when we're first going to block it out, because I feel sometimes it's more important that Doug is there, but all three of us try to be there to see that, so we can figure out what we're going to do and what Alana's going to do for second boom, and to see how the shot's going to be planned out, and to see what obstacles that we might have to work on.
So describe the process too. Maybe again these younger aspiring production people want to know. So you're called to do a new project, a new film. Mm-hmm. How far in advance are you notified of, like, okay, here's the story? What do you do for yourself at that point? Maybe you have the script in front of you, and you kind of start already building in your mind of how things potentially may be blocked out or what you may need. Or is it literally you just show up and...
No, with the projects I'm working on these days, Jesse, I usually have a script many months before we start shooting, or at least a draft of it. And the first thing I'm going to do is read a script just for the enjoyment of it. Do I like this story? Do I like this project, these characters, that type of thing? Because I want to enjoy what I'm working on. And then the next thing is I'll read the script a second time, looking at it from a technical sense. Okay, I've got 7 people in this scene that all speak. That's going to be something I'm going to highlight. I do what I call a breakdown, and then also I'm breaking down any potential playback that there might be, any type of music that might be used actually on the set. Also looking for any technical things that we might have to overcome, like if we're doing a picture that has spacesuits in it. Okay, the actors are in suits, So then there's going to be communications that we're going to have to provide. We're going to have to mic the suits, and it's not just to record the actors, but the actors have to be able to hear each other, and then they also have to be able to hear directions from the director or from the first AD. So there has to be a whole communication system that we're going to have to bring in and make sure that works for everyone. And the actors and the director being able to communicate is almost more important than the production sound at that point. And so people go, whoa, how could that be? Well, if people can't hear each other and cannot talk to each other when they're doing a scene and trying to get directions or ask questions and things, then everybody becomes frustrated. And that frustration level can cause a lot of issues on a set, and you want to prevent that from happening. And if you can prevent that from happening, then you're going to be able to record your dialogue, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And speaking about that, one of the other questions that we have here is, it seems that wireless microphones are relied on more and more, and there's always a debate about how much they should be used and how they compare to the boom mics. What is your philosophy about when to use wireless lav mics and when to use a boom? And how do you interact with other departments to try to have the best scenario for using your boom?
Yes, and I'll tell you, I've been probably one of the people who got on a little earlier with about miking everyone and tracking everyone, due to the fact this was happening more when I was doing television, and when you're shooting with 2 and 3 cameras, there's not a lot of time for rehearsals and blocking. The only way that you can capture those performances sometimes is with wireless mics, because you're lit out all of a sudden, you're reflected out, or wide and tight, as we're always familiar with. And my philosophy is, if you already have a mic'd and have it tracked, it's there as a backup. You can still rely on your boom for most of the sound, or hopefully all the sound. I mean, that's always our goal, but we also have to be prepared if that doesn't work. And you cannot stop a scene in the middle of the scene all of a sudden because one camera goes wide, or all of a sudden they do something else that wasn't planned, and say, stop, I need to put a mic on them now. That's not going to go over well with production, with the AD department, and sometimes even the actors, because then you're taking people out of their moment of that performance. Well, if you already have a mic on them, and if you need it, you can use it. Does that make any sense? It's sometimes about, you don't want to interrupt the flow, and if they're already mic'd, it's okay. Now, some people will argue with me on that, about, oh, well, if we can just get it on the boom. Well, yeah, we think we can get most of it on the boom a lot of the time. But when we get pushed into a corner at the last second, we have a way out and can still protect the performance. But to me, it's all about protecting the performance. And keeping people mic'd is another way of doing that. And if it doesn't have to be used, then fine. It's there if it was needed.
As far as microphones, what are some of your go-to microphones right now? Or even to tell us briefly about kind of the history of probably the microphones you've had with you, and some maybe still,
Yeah. I guess my history was originally with the Sennheiser with the 816 and a 416. I didn't own those, but I used those, or they were in a production package that I would use. Then as I started to buy microphones, I went with the Sheps, and I went with a Neumann 81 and a Neumann 82. At that time, I thought those sounded great. They had a nice warm sound to them. And eventually moved on to MKH 60 and 70, and still use Sheps for indoors. Kind of got away from the 60 and 70 when the Sheps, the CMIT came out, and still used the shorter Sheps for indoors. And then eventually, over the last few years, I've been using the MKH 50s, and that kind of replaced the Sheps, and just using the CMIT for larger sets and outdoors. And then recently, we have gone with a DPA 4098 as a plant mic. The new game changers are the 4098s. That's a long version that we have for some things, but here's a smaller version. We've been using these in cars for plant mics, on a desk, whatnot. You can easily plug them into whichever transmitter you own, whether it be Zaxcom or Electrosonics, by changing out the microdot. Also, we have extension cables for them. We can hardwire them if necessary, or extend the transmitter farther away. but I really love how these sound. It took my ears a little getting used to the first time we used them in a scene, but I grew to love them quickly. They have a great reach. They don't have to be right here. They can still be a few feet away, and they still really sound good. Another mic that we've just started playing with that I really like is another DPA mic, the 4017 shotgun. We used it a lot on the second unit that we just finished, and everyone on my team was like, wow. And I think we were given one to demo, and we played with it for about a month and really enjoyed it. So I think we're going to be adding that to the package before we start our next picture. But, it all starts at the microphone. So long as you have a good mic, it can be a Sheps, it can be a Sennheiser, it can be a DPA. It doesn't matter, but just start with a good mic.
So obviously film and video production requires a ton of traveling, depending on the script. So I'm sure you've been to a ton of places. Mm-hmm. Is there one or two places that really stand out that are really memorable?
I had the opportunity to film in Egypt and Morocco. Of course, this is many years ago before the political climate that's there now. And that was great. That was a lot of fun to see that part of the world and to work there. And then the place I truly fell in love with was Prague in the Czech Republic. I worked on 2 movies there and just fell in love with Prague. I was much younger then, and I was just ready to pack up the family and move to Prague and become an expatriate because it was just a beautiful place, beautiful people, so much culture and art there. Anyway.
So, with obviously with that, sound mixers with families and married and requires a ton of travel. What's the longest you've been away? Maybe a lot of these younger guys don't know that. Hey, once you get in the thick of it, you may be away for quite a bit. On these productions, and that's just the nature of the business.
Yeah, a lot of times it's easier to bring the family out than go to the family if you're working. So I would recommend that. Doug Cameron with his family, because he lives out of town, he does not live in Atlanta, and he lives in North Carolina. Him and his wife have the 2-week rule. So every 2 weeks, either they come and visit or he goes home and visits. And I think that's probably why Doug has kept his marriage. So I think that would be a good rule to live by because it has worked for him. My perspective, I think all of us would like to see there be a little more credit given to sound and a little more respect. Some productions, it seems to vary from production to production. Some productions are very sound savvy, very supportive of what you're trying to do, while other productions seem to care less. Obviously, I would like to see our craft across the board, being respected by other departments and production when locations are chosen and things like that. And of course, the multi-camera thing is always challenging for any sound department if people are going to shoot wide and tight. But I don't see it changing. I would love to see it change, but because of schedules and time, they want to be able to shoot an episode in 6 days instead of 7, and so they're going to use more cameras to accomplish that. And sometimes I think if people would choose their shots more wisely on what's actually going to be used. One thing I learned in episodic television is, I'd see all the footage that was shot, then you see the final product. Very little of what was shot is used in the final product. All that excess footage and extra cameras and things like that, or at least what I noticed on some of the series that I worked on. But I guess getting back to, the production side of things, I don't know, things are getting better. We're getting new tools. The Kantar X3, obviously, I think is a game changer. I was not a big fan of the 1 and the 2, but I really think they did a lot to improve that in the 3. I'm very impressed with. I think Zaxcom's going to come out with some game changers next year with the Diva 32. I'm just glad that we have manufacturers that keep coming up with things. I would like to see somebody build a real production board that's made to do our type of work, that people are not having to carry inverters on their carts. That's a 12 or 14 channel board, standalone board, or 16, that's made for production sound, that's not made for another part of our industry.
Right.
But also something else, I think Movie Slate is going to change what is going to be a game changer. I think it already is a game changer. First, let me say that. But I think eventually here in the next few years, you're going to see that integrated with the script supervisor and with the camera department. And ideally, the three of us are going to put together one report for production that will all be linked together. And I think that's going to really change our workflow, so to speak. And that the script supervisor would be able to send to my iPad the correction for the scene number. And it was scene 25 and not 24. And that she'll be able to push that to me and to the camera department, and that this will get the camera department out of handwritten reports, which they're still doing, which is pretty antiquated when you think about where we are right now with technology.
Multi-track file-based recording has been the norm for quite a while now, but the track count seems to always be creeping up higher and higher. Tell us how you typically, there's a few questions in here, so it says,
okay.
Tell us how you typically arrange the tracks, 1 through, whatever that may be, and how many tracks do you find you need more and more in recent productions, and do you think those are going to increase?
I don't know if they're really going to increase. I think it depends on what project you're on and how many characters you're dealing with. But for the most part, I have a mix track, I have my boom track, and then we break out the ISOs from there. So generally the third track would be actor who's number 1 on the call sheet, and who's number 2 on the call sheet, number 3 down the line. And then after that, we would put in the plant mics and the second boom. And then if we were laying back the playback track, that would follow after all of that.
Cool.
But that's generally how my track count's laid out.
And obviously, from production to production,
it stays the same. And I think it's kind of important to keep it the same on a production. That way they know, okay, the third track's going to be, that an actor in the scene. The fourth track is, and my notes are pretty thorough too, and labeling the tracks as well. But you want to give your downstream, your guys in post-production, consistency, and that helps them do their job quickly. Because with the schedules that they're being given now, they're under a lot of time constraints on getting everything edited and put out there, especially on television.
So looking back at all these years, working in production, is there like an aspect to this career that's been most satisfying for you?
I don't know. You're gonna make me think. What's been the most satisfying thing about it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. It's always great to be a part, and all the jokes have been made about sound mixers and sound people not being part of the film process, but yet we are. We're part of the people. We're part of the team that helps the director tell the story. We're the team that captures those performances. So hopefully they're not having to be replaced, because when you capture it in the moment, when the camera's rolling and it's right there and everybody hits it just right. The camera operator, the crane operator, the lighting was just right, the performances were just right, and it was what the director wanted, and the sound was just right. There's nothing more satisfying than that, especially on those special moments when you're telling a story. That's just satisfying. And also, I guess the other thing is, I feel so comfortable on a set. I feel, other than being at my home, that's one of the most comfortable places I feel, is being at the sound card.
So, young aspiring mixers are probably watching this right now, and, some of them are kind of at that crossroad. Do I jump into this career? Or maybe some have already started. So let's pretend you've walked in the room with young, eager, aspiring, minds. What do you tell them?
And I tell them this because I see this in my teenagers. Everybody wants everything right now. It took me many, many years to build my career. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen over 6 months. It didn't happen over a year or two. It took a long time to build a career. And if your heart's in it and you want to do it, be patient and pursue it and pursue your passion, but it's going to take time. I think with the mentality that the younger people have these days, you can download any video, any TV show, any film instantly and watch it on demand. You can have just about anything in the world delivered on your doorstep by Amazon in 2 days. Now you can cook any meal in about 3 minutes in the microwave. But there's this, everybody wants everything right now, and it's a thing nobody understands. Sometimes I think the younger people getting into this, it takes time to develop the skills, to develop the relationship and everything else, and to have a really success. And there are people who obviously broke out of that mold and had some lucky breaks, but for the most part, it just takes persistence, and it takes some years to build a career and be prepared to do that. That's the question.
So if you had to give them 3 things that you felt are helpful as they jump into this career, what would those be?
Relationships. And when I say that, don't burn any bridges. Treat everyone with respect, even if they're the PA on the set, because that PA could be your boss in 10 years or could be in a position to hire you. I've seen it. I've been a part of that. A gentleman I started with doing some of the early low-budget B movies that I did is now a main producer and still a good friend. He was working in the production office when I first met him many years ago. But it's all about the relationships, is to network, get to know people. And I've tried to, and not just myself and many others, have tried to, embrace the sound community and welcome people in, look at it as friendly competition. Don't start having attitudes against people, but people also pass jobs on to each other. So I think the relationship side of it. The next thing I would do if you're just learning or just getting into this business, because the way it's based these days, it is a skill that you have to have, is learning how to wire somebody and making it sound great. Even though all of us would love to do it just all on the boom, it's not necessarily that way, especially in reality television, especially in a lot of episodic television with a lot of cameras. So a skill of knowing how to wire someone is invaluable. And I'm going to promote Thomas Pop's book, Down to the Wire. Thomas wrote an electronic book, and it basically goes through all the different methods to wire someone. I know 247 ways to wire somebody, and I learn 4 more on every film I do. So you've got to always continue to learn. Don't ever get to the point that you think you know how to do everything. And speaking of the wiring, let's see if I can do this. I mean, this is just a portion of the tools we use for wiring people and attaching and hiding mics. It's just a small part of it.
Visit us online at trewaudio.com.
I think a third thing is continued self-education. As we have new technology that comes out yearly, monthly, we've got some new manufacturers in the game making different products for us. To be able to learn these products and to be able to, continually to grow and to educate yourself. Back before the internet was what it is today, I mean, I would purchase a book just because I had one chapter on location sound and I could learn something new from that. And then, of course, with my peers sharing, trading information with them, and now with people like Trew Audio and other vendors, you got to realize we are in such a wonderful craft to be able to learn from. You can, if you're one of Zaxcom's customers, you can call and talk to Glenn Sanders, the president of Zaxcom, if you're having an issue or need some help or have a problem. You can talk to Electrosonics. You can talk to Carl or Gordon about anything, or send them an email. You can actually talk to the people that make our products, which is pretty great. The same thing with Comtech. I've talked to Laurel many times at Comtech. I consider her a friend. But I don't think there's too many other industries where you can just reach out and talk to people and learn from these people and the products they make, and as well as Glenn Trew in remote audio. There are things that, and they listen. If there's something that's not working on a product or something you want to change, they actually listen. I made Glenn put the power light on the Meon. The first Meon didn't have a light on it, so you didn't know when you got unplugged. And if you get unplugged now, it turns red. And I kept telling Glenn he needed to do that, and he did. But that's the relationship we have in our industry with our vendors, and they're very open to us. And I don't really know other industries that are like that. But again, it goes back to learning from them and continuing to learn. Don't ever get to the point where you think you you've mastered the craft and you've mastered the equipment. But yeah, I mean, there was a learning curve from going from a mono Nagra to a timecode Nagra, and then having to deal with timecode and timecode slates. And then after that, it was learning a DAT machine. And then for me, it was the Diva 2. So I've come up through and managed to stay a part of technology.
Whit, thanks for hanging with us, man.
Yeah.
I think that people are going to really enjoy this. And again, we just want to keep providing, resources to folks, and we're going to be interviewing, a ton of other people that, are in that industry, in the thick of it, and because, we're learning and growing, together. And one of the cool things that, at our Trew Audio shops is, our open floor plan, and we have the gear set out, and we always encourage people to come on, check it out. We have a lot of this on demo, come play with it, and use this as a resource, like you said, to continue learning. So you mentioned you got a Kantar recently,
yes.
And so let's chat about that. Matter of fact, let's take a look at your cart a little bit,
okay.
And I'm sure people want to see what your setup is, and
okay.
So cool.